Hey everybody, Randy Patterson here with Boomerocity. Odds are you haven't heard of this guy that you're about to watch. His name is Rockie Lynne, but he is one heck of a talent. He's been around for quite a while, very talented on the guitar, on lyric writing, the whole nine yards. Early in his career, he was quite the rock shredder. If you liked Eddie Van Halen, you would have loved Ricky's work back then. But he migrated more into a country sound, which I also love. He's amazing at that. He's a phenomenal songwriter in that respect. And but I never heard of him until, quite frankly, pretty recently. And a mutual friend of ours had me watch his documentary, Rocky's documentary, as well as listen to his latest album. And wow, 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 wow. You're going to love this guy. You're going to love this interview. This guy is such a sweetheart to talk to, gentle spirit, just exudes positivity. And I love every bit of that. And I think I found a new friend. I could always use good new friends, can't you? I'd really love for you to watch this thing all the way through because it's heart touching. Rocky's story is compelling. It's tough, but it's compelling. After you watch this interview, please watch his documentary and please buy his new album. You're going to love it all. And as always, I ask that you hit like on whatever you're watching or listening to this on. Please subscribe. It doesn't cost you anything. And please share it with your friends who you think might enjoy this story and music. So without any further ado, here's my first of what I'm sure is going to be many more interviews with Rockie Lynne. Until next time, this is Randy Patterson with Boomerocity. Take care.
Hey, Randy, how are you, man?
Doing great. How about yourself?
Oh my gosh, how nice to finally get in here with you. I've been watching your podcast. I love what you do, man.
Well, thank you. That means the world to me. Thank you so much.
Did you grow up in Sevierville, Tennessee?
I was born right over the hill from Sevierville in a little town called Maryville, kind of now a bedroom community to Knoxville. But
Mm-hmm.
my mom grew up there. Her dad worked at the aluminum plant there, and my dad was born down the road in Madisonville. And back when the Memorial Hospital was still a log cabin, that's where I was born. So
Wow.
so
Was that
but
true? Was it really a log
no,
cabin?
no, I'm not quite that old, Rocky. Come on. So, but I grew up in Arizona, got a lot of friends and viewers in the Phoenix area, but I was mostly in Dallas most of my so-called adult life. And while I was going through a divorce almost 10 and a half years ago, I came here temporarily to spend some time with mom and dad, and then mom passed away a few years ago, and I'm still here and helping my dad. He's beginning to go, downhill. He's going to be 88 next month. So it's, so I'm glad I'm here. I get to help take care of him with my sister.
Man,
And
I know that story.
I'm blessed. I'm blessed. So you're over in Carolina, right? North Carolina?
I am.
Oh,
My first job out of Nashville, Tennessee was playing with the third, I guess now the third most famous act from Sevierville, Tennessee. Sevierville, Tennessee. The first, of course, would be you, I reckon, Randy Patterson. And then number two
flattery
would
will
be
get you
Dolly.
everything.
Yeah, and then number two would be Dolly, right?
Right.
And then I played guitar for a band called the McCarter Sisters. They were
Oh, yeah.
three sisters from Sevierville, Tennessee, three beautiful, sweet, sweet young ladies.
Mhm.
And they were on Warner Brothers, and I got the job playing guitar for them on the telephone. I got the job over the phone, so
I'll be
that's
darned.
probably why I got it, because they couldn't see me or hear me play, but they needed a guitar player really bad, so they let me do it.
Well, hey, I watched your documentary, man. I saw you quite the quite the shredder back there, man. I know Eddie Van Halen was an influence and all, and Hendrix was, you're no slouch, man.
Man,
It's
I think the funniest thing about this documentary to me, not funny or not funny, funny, but maybe funny, funny, but funny odd for sure, is that somehow some folks are watching it and thinking that I think I know what I'm doing, that I think I got it, I'm the farthest thing away from that, man. I think that guitar playing is a lot like riding a motorcycle. Um, I think the day that you look at that motorcycle and think, "Boy, I know how to ride that thing," that's the day you ought to hang up those keys
Mm,
because you could get hurt, you know? You have
yeah.
to always pay attention to it, and guitar comes with such a lineage. I mean, you of anybody, Randy, would know because of all the people you've talked to Steve Vai, you talked to the biggest ones in the world.
Mhm.
And there's so much history there, especially living so long in Nashville where Chet Atkins and Steve Wariner and Hoyt Axton
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
and Bela Fleck and all those great musicians came from. For me, I don't ever want to look at it and go, boy, I think I got this. I just want to be a eternal student of it and try to figure some of it out if I can.
Well, I just an hour ago, I hung up from a group interview with a super group. You may or may not have heard of them, called the Redcoats, and it has Matt Bissonette, who was Elton
Oh
John's
yeah,
bass
drummer.
player, and
Yeah.
his brother is Greg, the drummer,
Greg, right.
and
Okay.
he's with Ringo Starr and all that. Andy Timmons, good friend of mine, and was with Danger
He's from
Danger.
Dallas, right?
Yeah, he's lives in McKinney, and
Yeah.
he's still playing. He was Olivia Newton John's music director,
Player for
guitars
years.
for
He played guitar for her, and
yeah,
my friend Mark Prentice was the bass player in Olivia's band,
that's
and he
right,
said,
that's
"You,"
right.
he said, "You should hear this guy playing guitar for Olivia." He gave and Andy had given him, I think, Yesterday and Today or something, one of the older like that was then, This Is Now, that
Yeah,
record. He'd
yeah,
given him
yeah.
that one, and, Mark said, "Listen to this." I said, "Man, I had that record since it came out. I've known" what was it? Was it Danger Danger or some band
Yeah,
like that
Danger
that Andy
Danger.
was
Yep,
in?
yep,
I moved to California, right about the end of that time, and Andy Timmons, I've been a fan of his forever. I think he's just so great at what he does, you know, he and I wish that he and people like him and, you know, Richie Kotzen, do you know who he
yep,
is?
yeah, sure
I
do.
wish people like that were the biggest stars on the planet because they have so much depth and knowledge and experience in the way that they play, and Richie's singing too, but Andy sings on some of those records too that he
Yep,
has.
yep. Well, the reason why I even brought them up is each one of those guys said exactly what you just said, and that's they're this they still feel like they're a student. And I think that when there's that, when their approach is filled with that kind of humility, just like you expressed a moment ago, I think that's where the greatness comes from.
Mm.
It's like you said about the motorcycle and using that analogy when it comes to guitar, you know, and to me, to have the comfort, as a fan, I don't play, as I keep telling people, I play a mean air guitar and that's about it. And that's if I can tune it, right? So they, they're from a fan standpoint, a non-musician standpoint, it's easy to look at it and think, man, you could be a guitar god, everybody worship you. But what I have found with everybody I've interviewed, and I've had the privilege, as you said, to talk to quite a few of them, there's still a humility there, a confidence to be sure, but that's different than arrogance. And to go over to approach the craft with a confident humility and a curiosity to keep picking something up and creating something new. To me, that's the seeds of greatness that I observe when I look at people.
You know, I can relate to that, Randy. When I went to this guitar school out in California called GIT, and
Mhm.
and at that time they would have big great players. I mean, like Jeff Berlin and Tim Bogert and Yngwie Malmsteen and
Mm.
people like that come through, and you could sign up for a 10-minute. It was either 5 minute or 10 minute. They called it a private lesson, but it really wasn't a private lesson. You just get to sit down beside somebody in a room and talk with them for a minute, you know.
Yeah.
And I waited in line for I think probably I came 8 hours before the school opened to sign up so I could have a private lesson with
Wow.
Steve Vai, and that's why I brought him up
Ooh.
before,
Mm.
and I sat in a room with him when I was a student at GIT. Well, I was working at the school there, but I sat in a room with him, and he said something to me that has stuck with me my whole life. I asked him I don't even remember exactly how I phrased the question, but it was something like, "What do you when you finish a night at a gig, what do you consider a success?" And he said, "I consider it a success when I have practiced enough that even when I have a bad night, my fans aren't let down."
Wow.
Now, and I took that to heart, and I mean, I practice and practice and practice, and there'll be nights that I come off stage thinking, "Man, I didn't play very well that night," and I'll have people come up to me and say, "That's the best I've ever heard you play," and I'll think, That's me trying to do what Steve Vai pointed me in the right direction to do,"
Yep.
to
Yep.
make it to where even though I'm not happy with how I'm clicking on all the cylinders, I've put in enough work that I can still do what it is we're trying to relate to these folks out
Yep.
there.
Well, two quick stories tied to all that. Have you seen, or one is a question, the other is a story. Have you seen the video when Steve Vai comes off the stage and into the crowd, and Andy Timmons is in there, and he hands him his guitar, and Andy starts.
No!
It's on YouTube. Look, just put both of their names in there, and you'll find it. I think there's might be two of them, one for sure, but I heard there was another one that I haven't seen yet. But it's fascinating, and that to me, it goes back to that humility and confidence that merges together in both of those men, you know.
Yeah.
But the other thing you mentioned, the Guitar Institute. One of my very first interviews, I mentioned this in the interview earlier today, was, I mean, I barely started Boomerocity. This was a little over 15 years ago. And I was working a day job with a tech company. And as luck would have it, I had to go to San Jose for a meeting, or actually Sunnyvale. But I connected with Sam Andrews of Big Brother and the Holding Company, Janis Joplin's
Oh. Yeah,
first
yeah.
man. And I arranged to meet with him in San Rafael. I had no idea it was going to take me 2 hours to get there, but it was worth every second of driving. And we sat in front of this closed, the cafe was closed for the evening. I set the recorder out and we just talked. And he was talking about this school that you mentioned. He said, Randy, when we were starting out and making this music, he goes, we were creating it. We were inventing the sound. He goes, now there's schools that crank, 500 graduates a year that who can play Hendrix as well as Hendrix, and it. When I mentioned it earlier, and I'll mention it to you in a way that kind of sounds like the sound and the genius and the creativity has been commoditized down to almost a negligible level, but we know better than that. How does that? And this is completely out of sync of the questions I have listed here to ask you, but with that kind of quote, how does that strike you as being as one who writes music, who creates, who can play just about anything on the guitar, and you hear a quote like that? How does that strike you?
Well, when we were starting out, people my age and your age, we would try to slow the records down or pick try if
Pick
it
the
was a
needle back up a note.
45, we're hitting it on 33 and seeing what the heck they were doing. And then schools like GIT and those places came along, and it was a monumental effort for me to go to GIT because I grew up poor ain't even the word for how we grew up. It was financially challenged. So
Mhm.
the only way I could go to GIT was to go in the Army, and the Army would pay for it. So I did 6 years in the United States Army, 3 years active and 3 years reserve, so I could go to the school. Today, young people can take their phone and look up, how do I play Purple Haze? And there'll be somebody on there to show them every single note and they'll learn it. And then I've had kids come into my studio here that could, like, they were tribute bands or bands that play cover music, and they'll play like those songs and they'll play them exactly note for note. But what's interesting is to me, the people that invented that stuff. Here's a great example. There's an old story in Nashville, Tennessee, of Chet Atkins sitting on his porch on 16th Avenue, and he had a guitar and he was playing the guitar, and this guy walks by and says, God, Chet, that guitar sounds amazing. And Chet sits it down beside him on the thing and says, how does it sound now? And
That's
that's the
it.
thing.
Yep.
The people like Jimi Hendrix and Billy Gibbons and Steve Vai and Andy Timmons, you can count on our two hands the people that they can play one note and you know who it is.
Mhm. Mhm.
It's because it's coming not from their fingers, it's coming from their soul. And I think that one thing I would love to see more of today is younger people getting back into scales and modes and theory and music theory, and not just how to do the mechanics of it, but where did it come from? You know, where did the 12 bar blues progression happen and how did it get here? And when you start putting that kind of time in, I think it helps you from your roots gather what your organic soul's trying to say, and it might help you say it better.
Yep. I agree. I agree. And it becomes internalized at that point, and
Mhm.
just spilled out. So watch the video. I mean, I'm sorry, the documentary, and
Thank you.
listened all the way through the album. And quite a story, quite a story. And I mean, a tough story to listen to. And I don't mean because it was badly done. I mean the exact opposite. And all the adversity that you dealt with and how you tied it all together, and I would think get some closure to some things in your life. I want to start off by asking you, why these two projects and why now?
Well, I thank you for watching the movie, Randy. That means a lot to me. And I wonder, not now, but whenever you feel like it, I wonder what your take on it was because when we started this project, it was a monumental process because I'm not 21 years old. I'm 142 years old and been
I'm
living
right there with
forever.
you.
We had a lot of room to cover in a show. I mean, in 56 minutes for the documentary that's on Amazon and PBS, there's a director's cut that's later, but in 56 minutes, we had to cover more than a year a minute. And the story could have been ugly. We could have told a ugly story about orphanages and foster homes and all the things that happened in the 60s to kids that had to grow up like that.
Mhm.
But that wasn't what we wanted to do, Randy. We wanted to make a story about hope, about having because I mean, when I was 4 years old and the first time I heard a man play guitar, his name was Niley Binge, and he came to play for all us kids there. And he sang, "I'm going to Alabama with a banjo on my knee." And buddy, you could have plugged me into a light socket or set me in Ringo Starr's kick drum at that moment. I mean, it just went through my body and electrified me. This guy, he was excited. He was I could still feel it in my bones. And I thought, I'm going to do that for the rest of my life. I'm going to learn how to do that. And I still feel that way now. But I want to, because that's one of the things with working with these young people here is that my job isn't so much to help them create their music, it's to help them make it sound like it's supposed to sound and avoid some potholes that maybe I hit along the way, you know? If I can help some young person miss some big thing that might slow them down or impede them in their process, that's what I want to do. But in our movie, we wanted it to come across as hopeful, as if whether you wanted to be a guitar player and a singer, or whether you wanted to be a carpenter or a plumber or uh, a tour guide in Africa, whatever your dream is, that you stick with that long enough and you can find your tribe, maybe. Did you get that kind of feeling from it, Randy? Did it come
Yes,
off positive?
yes, I did, and I probably appreciated it a bit more than maybe a little bit more casual viewer would, because yeah, I lived less than a year in Nashville and for my then day job, but I know, as you might imagine, I know a lot of people there and know what Nashville can be like to somebody trying to break into the business. It's not a very forgiving town. So to be
Mm.
able to to have perseverance like you're talking about, and that striving for excellence, I mean, I think your story will resonate with people because you've been there, done that, and you're still here talking about it.
And that's kind of the point of the whole point of the movie is that I'm still here, still trying to move forward to that. And the thing about if you decide to go after a music career, you're gonna hear a lot of no, and you're gonna a lot of hear, well, we're not looking for that, or that doesn't suit us. And I always look at each one of those no's as just one more step in the guy or the situation that would say yes to us. I had an attorney once in Minneapolis. He was Prince's attorney, and he had taken a shine to me, and help me put together a package and do something. And anyway, it didn't work. We didn't get anything going. And he said, "What are you going to do now?" And I said, "Well, I'm going to do it again. I'm going to make another record and I'm going to try it again." And he said, "Well, you're just too stupid to quit, aren't you?" And I think in retrospect, I think he's right. I think that part of the any success or perceived success that we might have had just be from the fact that I'm just too hard-headed to go hang it up on a wall and not do it.
Yep.
And so to finally answer your question after I'm talking all day and I can't seem to stop, the the movie was started by J.C. Summerford, she was the director on this A&E show that I hosted a couple episodes of called Operation Build. And what they do is, uh, retrofit veterans' homes so that had been injured in the war so they could get in and out of it. And it was
Mhm.
an honor for me to host that. But she, after getting to know me, said she felt like she wanted to do a documentary. And I thought, well, man, that's about the worst idea I think I've ever heard. Why would anybody want to do a documentary on me? I mean, but the reality is when you get right down just to nuts and bolts of it, I was found abandoned as an infant, just a little baby boy, left in a basket outside of an orphanage. Well, that's a that's not really a movie. It's just a bad hand. I got dealt a bad hand, you know? And I grew up with two. When I was 5 years old, I was adopted by some wonderful people, the wonderful mother and father that were very, very intelligent people, but they grew up during the Depression and World War II.
Mhm.
So my mama only had a third grade education. And
Wow.
my dad had finished the fifth grade. And when he had finished the fifth grade, his father, who was an alcoholic, stepped in front of a car and got paralyzed from the
Oh,
waist down.
no.
So my adopted dad, had to quit school before the sixth grade and go to work in a sawmill. He had to lie about his age because he was only 12, and he had to lie and say he was 16 to get the job and raise his 10 brothers and sisters and his father, who had become a dependent as well. So he grew up and they married my mom. They moved to Statesville, which is south of North Wilkesboro, and he got a job at the furniture factory there. And then he got drafted, went to Korea, and came back from Korea. They were unable to have children, and they were also financially challenged. And it's hard to fill out the paperwork if you can't read. So, but the older kids at the orphanage sometimes could get a break and get adopted by those because the babies go pretty fast sometimes. But in the old days, the older kids would be harder to place, and so maybe it was a kind of like I think it was kind of a God thing. I needed them, and they needed me, and it's a lot like your situation now, Randy. I moved back here to North Carolina to care for that man because my mom died in '87. My dad is now 91. I
Wow.
take him to his VA appointments, and I take him his food, and I'm able to, in some beautiful kind of way, man. He gave me a roof over my head and food when I didn't have it, and now I'm kind of getting to do that same thing in the last part of his journey, and
Yeah.
I can't tell you how much it means to me. It just means the world to me to be able to love him like he loved me. You know?
And it's just, I mean, it's resonating with me, man. Believe me, I get to live next door to my dad, and for me, it just happened instantly. I mean, literally, it felt like one day he was his usual self. The next day, some weird stuff started happening, and we're waiting for tests and such to see if it's dementia or Alzheimer's. But it's like I have a completely different dad, and I didn't get to say goodbye to the old one.
Mm,
But yeah, I mean, it resonates. And something else about your story resonates with me. My grandfather, um, his mother died of some illness. His father worked at the Alcoa aluminum plant over here next to Maryville in Alcoa, Tennessee. And his father died, and my grandfather, in I think his fifth grade, had to basically raise his siblings, especially the younger ones. And he had a fifth grade education, worked his entire adult life at the plant, and then died 2 or 3 years after he retired.
my
Just
God.
a simple man, simple man. I'm already older than he was when he died, I believe. And
Right.
loved him dearly, miss him every day. That he died back in 1973. And so, but I still remember everything about him, you know. But that's that generation, man.
Oh, yeah.
They did what they had to do. We're all today, we none of us, I think, could do a thimblesful compared to what they did, you know.
You're exactly right. I think all the time about my dad. If he'd have had the same opportunities I'd have had, he'd have been an electrical engineer or mechanical engineer or something. He can look at anything and know exactly how it works and how to fix it. He
Oh,
just
cool.
was never in a position. He was not a just because he's not educated does not mean that he's not very smart. He's a very smart man.
Yeah.
But same as him, that factory, he went to work when the factory opened. His employee number was 8. He was the 8th employee.
Golly.
And he worked there for 53 years, and then he retired. And now he's 91 and, still the toughest old guy I've ever met in my life. I love
Yeah.
him, man.
Yeah, that's amazing. Something I picked up on your story that I found kind of interesting. I'm sure you figured it out early on or others have pointed it out to you, but your first 2 records and your record player. I saw it was Kiss Alive and Hendrix Bold as Love, and, you know, love both albums. But how interesting I thought it was that you're as great of a guitar player as you are, that you picked up on Hendrix first off, and you both were in the Air Force, were you not? Or paratroopers?
In the airborne
Yeah.
paratroopers, Jimi Hendrix was a paratrooper in the 101st Airborne up at Clarksville, Kentucky,
Mhm.
and I was at Fort Bragg. But about those records, I got those records at a First Baptist Church yard sale in Statesville, North Carolina. My mama took me. I'd probably been living there a year or so, and we went to that yard sale. They wanted $1. It was a phonograph, and the 2 records were inside the phonograph. Had anybody from that church looked at those records, they wouldn't have sold those records because that would have been the devil's music back then, right?
May as well
But
been
I
Herb Albert's cream pie lady, right? So
They
or
would have never
Abraxas.
let that go, and they totally let me have it. I walked out of there with that music that, in retrospect, I mean, who between Kiss and Jimi Hendrix, they've influenced probably, you know, I guess the Beatles probably hit people more than them, but there wouldn't be a whole lot more that had done that.
Right.
Everybody my age crazy about Kiss.
Well, there your adoption, there it seems to me, outside looking in, that just by default, I mean, your story, as hard and as complicated as it is and was in your childhood, did you find that it had left some did it leave some complicated impact on you? I know for all of us, as we grow up, we have things that happen in our childhood, and our childhood wires us to respond and react and do things the way we do. And some of us have to go back and reprogram and rewire. Some of us don't know enough to do it. You know, there did you find that your childhood story impacted you in ways that affected your career? And if you want to share it, even in your personal life.
Well, I think back then, foster parents they would get paid per kid that they would get to keep, and that didn't mean that they cared for those kids as much as they were a source of income for them.
Right.
And I think as a little boy, I learned pretty quick, Randy, that the way for me to get through was to forgive, forget, and look forward. Because there was holding on to something in the back or someone that mistreated you wouldn't be able to you couldn't change it. You couldn't do a dang thing about it. And the only way to move forward was to go forward. And I took that in my life with me moving forward, that I try to always look forward. And if I do look back, I try to look back on the good things. And I don't try not, I think everybody deserves to be forgiven and everybody deserves a second chance. And so the people that were caring for us kids and doing all that, they were doing the best that they could. If they could have done any better, they probably would, you know?
Mm.
So I think and then when I began to have a family and have children, I think the sense of responsibility as a father really dug into my heart. Because I wanted them, my girls, to always feel like there was love there and support no matter what. And so I can sit here as a grown man and say I never yelled at my children, I never struck them. I loved them and I treated them like adults because I felt like when they look back through the history, the roots were just going to be me. Like there would be no pictures on the wall of their great great grandfather. It would just be me. So the most important thing is that I try to set a good example for them and show them how to love life and love each other. And then they made this movie and they found my father and my mother. And now Thanksgiving at our house used to be a little table
Oh,
and a small family saying a prayer. Now we go up to a great big church in Wilkesboro, North Carolina, and I've got cousins and nephews and nieces and brothers and sisters and people that come in. Uncle Rocky's here, Uncle Rocky, and it never ever doesn't just touch me to my soul because I think there's a part of us, all of us, that wonder, well, who the heck, who are we?
yeah.
And where did we come from? And that's another big part of our movie that I don't think any of us saw coming is that when like I never my dad when we found him, my friend Kathleen bought me a 23andMe ancestry tracer ancestor kit for my birthday.
Mhm.
And I didn't think anything about it, didn't know nothing. And then through that process is how we found my father. He was 84 years old, my biological father, and he never knew that I'd been born, never knew that he had a son, never knew any of it. Guess what he did? He was a guitar player in a country band.
Mhm. I was
He
just
was a
oh, excuse me.
paratrooper in the 82nd Airborne,
Wow.
and he rode a motorcycle his whole life. And within 10 minutes of meeting him, Randy, it was obvious that he was my father and that we were two peas in a pod, as my mama would say. And within just a few minutes after meeting him, he took my hand like this. He grabbed my hand and he said, I just want you to know if I'd have known you was in that place, I'd have come and got you. And he meant that with all of his heart. And then during COVID, he got sick. You know, the movie, there's a part in the movie where he comes on stage and sings with us.
That's so
And then
cool.
later on, COVID kind of stopped our production, and I would go up to his house and sit in his room there and play guitar and sing with him because he couldn't finger the guitar anymore
Yeah.
like he used to. And then shortly before he got to the very end part of his life, he said, I want you to have something. And he gave me his guitar. He
Mhm.
gave me I've got it right here. This is if you'd go see, uh, Clyde Holloway playing guitar and at the BFWs and all those places, it's interesting because when I grew up here, I did that too. When I didn't work at the fast food places. I played in a band with old men our age. I was playing honky tonks and bars, and he and I have been playing the same places. We probably ran right next to each other,
Well, I was just
many,
going to
many
ask you,
times.
do you think was there any chance that your paths may have crossed unbeknownst to each other?
I don't know that we ever actually were in the same place at the same time, but we played a lot of the same places
Wow.
later on. And he gave me the guitar. I mean, I know how much he loves his family, his daughters, and his son, and he wanted me to have that guitar. And I write on that guitar every day. I feel connected to it, and I just that movie brought so much to our lives, so much closure, I guess is how you put it. You
Yeah.
know, how it's like, okay, I know where this is going now. Let's see where it goes next.
Yeah. Wow. Did this discovery, and sadly you didn't get to you located your mother's family, but you didn't get to see her before she passed, her biological mom. But how I was planning on sticking mostly to music here, but this is all great stuff. Did finding your parents or your parents' families, did that did that change anything in you as far as how you are as a dad? That I mean, because it sounds like you've been a great dad all along, but to all of a sudden have that additional layer there that is no longer a mystery. You got to meet your dad. You've seen his, your now family with his other family. You've met your mother's family. How has that impacted you as a father and how you are towards your girls and such?
Well, until we made this movie, Randy, I I didn't think it was important where I who my parents was or where I was from. I mean, and I think I don't know if I was lying to myself or I was just not aware of how significant finding my birth family would be, you know? And in my case, it was very positive because both families embraced me and brought me in. It could have been different. It could have had a different outcome. And I think more than anything, it just made me, especially because my children are older now. My oldest daughter is grown. She's grown and she's married. She lives in, she lives in Canada. She
Oh,
has a great career, but I think that it made me resolve that it's important that the holidays and as many times as I can get near that child and wrap my arms around her, even if she is 25 years old, to tell her I love her, that I have to do it because there just seems to be nothing more important than that foundation and that family of where you're from. I
mhm.
think I learned that, and then I got a brother now I never knew I had, and he checks up on me, he's a truck driver, he's a big, burly truck driving dude, and he'll call me up and say, "How you doing, brother?" And I'm like, "I'm doing good, man." I never knew it would mean that much to me. I kinda always told myself it didn't really matter, but then in the end I guess it does matter. It's funny, I started out this music business to try to go out and change the world and figure out if I could be somebody, but all I really found, I guess, at the end of the day was I found me, and I found who I was and where I'm from, and I think in some ways it made me a much better person.
You something I picked up on in the documentary as well that blew my mind because we both know how Nashville is first of all, oddly enough, you mentioned Printer's Alley there. When I was working in downtown Nashville before the pandemic shut everything down, I worked a half a block from there. And
Oh,
I
man.
always went over there, that little London pub thing that you go down into the basement. I ate lunch there at least once a week, sometimes twice, and loved it, absolutely loved it. But Nashville, you one thing I picked up on in the documentary is that while you were playing there, you did something that I think is often the kiss of death for bands, and that is you didn't play covers. You played original stuff. And most venues you go into, they want you to play the familiar stuff to make people get up and dance and drink more beer and all that kind of stuff. I mean, if you don't do that, you usually don't get another gig. And yet you were playing original stuff in your gigs there. How did you manage to pull that off?
That was just in retrospect, look at our when our during our club band years, and that was back in the around the turn of the century, you could make a living playing in clubs,
Mhm,
big clubs that they're all over like Grizzly Rose was in Denver and the Billy Bob's down in Texas and
mhm,
the Wild Horse in Nashville and Knoxville, it's Cotton Eye Joe, I think.
yep,
Uh, and you'd go there and play for a whole week and and you could make a living. You could make enough money to get you to the next place to play for the next week, and if you're still playing music, then that was a success in my mind. That's
mhm.
how I thought about it. But I wanted to do my music, so I sang original music, and the way that we were able to do that is that, we would end each set with a cover tune. There'd be one tune at the end of the set that was a cover tune, and I would say, "Now stick around, cause next set, we got Brooks& and Dunn coming up," and then at the end, we'd play a Brooks& and Dunn song or whatever. 2 things. I would have had a much better club career had I played covers because it was hard to get booked. And there was a period where every time I would play a club, I would get a club owner to write me a letter if he thought we did okay. And
That was
and I
smart.
ended up with a whole notebook full of letters, and I was booking myself. So I think it was 2 weeks, and I got on my motorcycle, and I went to all those big clubs, and I went in and out with all these letters, and I offered to play for free. I'd say, "I'll play here, I'll come here, and if you don't like it at the end of the week, you don't have to pay me a thing. But if you do, pay me what you pay the rest of the bands. I'd like to get
This
on the list of bands coming back." And the only thing I think that saved us is that this was when line dancing was huge. Everybody would come and they would do the line dance. And I
mm,
had a really good friend in Yuma, Arizona. His name was Jose and Sandra, two other friends. They taught line dances, and they had made up dances to my songs.
huh?
And they all have names like the Tush Push and the Cha Cha and stuff like that. And he wrote down for me what my song was. So when we were playing those great big dance clubs like the Grizzly Rose, I go, "All right, folks, we're getting ready to do a tush push. Here we come." And they would know what the song is, and the dancer, they would know what the dance is. So they would come out to line up the whole dang dance floor to do that. And then I would play something that they didn't know, but the beat was where they could dance to it. And that kept us from probably getting thrown out a bunch of times, you know?
Yeah,
And then, but also, it's a great way to gauge your songs, Randy. I mean, if you're in that world and you play this song and it flops every night, you know that song's not very good.
that's right.
But if you play something and people are digging it and they're going around and doing their dancing to it, you think, okay, I'm on to something here. How do I make this better? So I could have probably done a little better in the club business if I played covers, but I think that every single VFW between here and Sevierville, Tennessee, has a 50-some-year-old man playing on Friday night thinking, "I wonder what would have happened if I'd have tried. I wonder what would have happened if I would have sung my own music and not played these." And the one thing that I can say on the day that I take the last breath, I can say, I tried it. I
Yep,
tried as hard as I could, and I gave it everything I had, and I did it
yep,
with my own music. And
yep.
I think that's where you find your way.
I agree. 'Cause I'm sure you have too. I've heard the cover bands that's tried different songs they probably shouldn't have.
Yeah.
Yeah, so not a good it's not a cover, it's more of a torn sheet at that point,
Well,
but
and chances are if I write it, I'm gonna be able to sing it 'cause I'll write it in the key and the range that I can sing.
that's right, that's right. You're quite again, I saw it in the documentary that I mean, I didn't know honestly what I was gonna see when I watched it, and I got kinda gripped pretty quick when I saw some of your playing, actually performing it and hearing it all that. You're quite this rocker and shredder, at least you were in the very beginning, and your career has, led you more into a for lack of a better way of putting it, country music type of thing. Do you still have some rock left in you? Can you still shred like you did back then? And is there going to be any more work from that genre that you're going to be doing?
Well, our new record, Love, the
Hmm.
one that goes with the movie, has some it's kinda like a more of a '70s, early '80s jam rock kinda record,
Hmm.
with still story songs in that I write stories about I'm not smart enough to make up stuff, so I pick a character or something I'm familiar with, and then I'll embellish that character on my songs, but
Hmm.
I think that and then what we wanted to capture with this record was that I would always make records, and the records would be very contrite. I mean, it'd be the 4-minute songs and the solo sections were whatever they were 16 bars or whatever. And then you'd come see us live, and we're like a jam band live. Everybody takes turns and we play. My fiddle player is off the hook, incredible, and Dirk Dowell. And so we wanted to make a record that had some of that with us. So what we did on this record is that normally I would write a song, which I do that every day in here, and then I would make a chart. I'd write a chart up. I got a chart around here, the one I wrote today somewhere. Hold on. Uh, and and then I'd make a chart, which that's what a chart looks like.
Right? Yeah.
And then I would do like a little demo of it where I'd play drums and bass and guitars on my early records. I was me playing everything on those records. And then I'd give them to the band and we would make a better version of my demo.
Hmm.
But on this record, we didn't do that at all. I would just write the song and they would come in, and I would have the guitar, and I would say, "Okay, here's how the song goes," and I would just play it one night in a row, one heartbeat at a time. Baby, we can make it. Put your hand in mine. And I would just play my part. And then we would sit out there in the lounge for a couple hours with drummer banging on a little cajon, piano player playing a little electric, Yamaha piano, bass player
Mhm.
acoustically until we had it, till we had the song where it felt like we were doing it. And then we would come back here in the studio and we would cut it. And that's what's on the album. It's like the best take that we got. We took the best take, cleaned it up, and there it is. And that's the other thing I love about the movie is that other than Lipstick and Do We Still, which were the singles off of my Universal records, those are the videos, those are just music videos. Every other piece of music on that movie is live. It's being performed live as you watch it.
Wow.
And that's something that we really took to our heart to do that and not use we don't use tricks or I don't call them tricks, that's not the right way. We don't play with tapes and stuff like that. It's just us. And what you see is what you get.
Pretty much live to tape or
Yeah, exactly. That's exactly.
ether.
That was the problem. What was the best take and how did it go? And then that's the arrangement.
Right. Were there, I mean, you've worked on a lot of records. Were there any surprises that came out of the making of this record that you weren't anticipating?
Well, live for the last several years, my fiddle player, Dirk Dowell, and I have always just played off of each other a lot. And there's in our live performance, there's a section where we have like this big duel back and forth, kind of like the Crossroads duel with Steve Vai and Ralph Macchio at the end, except neither one of us are that handsome or that good, but that's what it is. And it's kind of that thing. And when we started doing this record, we decided that that's what we'd spend a lot of time out there working through the solos where how the Allman Brothers would have, dual twin guitars and they would
Mhm.
play parts and phrases off of each other. And all the Nashville guys, Brent Mason and Roy Nichols and Mike Sievers, and all those people do that like crazy. They're just great at it. So, but we started making the solos where have like that I would start a phrase and then he would finish it, and then we would come back and do either counterpoint with each other or a harmony on the end. And I think working out what it made us do was it made us look at our individual playing. And I'm talking about our solo techniques between the fiddle and myself. And it made our show so much tighter and more cohesive because now we realize that this thing that we were doing kind of organically is a thing. It's kind of a cool thing because I play rock kind of blues rock guitar stuff, and he is a world champion bluegrass fiddle player. So there's two different worlds that we come from that seem to meld together really well because he sticks with the style that he does, and I don't have any choice but to stick with the style I do because I can't do anything else. And we put them together and it kind of works.
Cool. Cool. What's been the response to the album so far?
I am humbled by the people that are sending us emails and ordering the record. We printed it in vinyl, which is
Mhm.
very cool. Here's how old I am. My first records were those Kiss records and the Jimi Hendrix record. I couldn't wait to make a record. And then by the time I was able to get a record deal, they didn't make records anymore.
The
And
little coasters.
yep, and now I've stayed on it so long, the records are back.
That's right.
So I think my plan is to stay till 8 tracks come back and see what happens. You remember how to cut off in the middle of the song and then come back up on the next song?
Tell me about it. I used to true story, I shouldn't even tell this because it's all about you, not me, but I remember when for my freshman year, Christmas my freshman year, mom and dad bought me 2 they bought me 3 8 tracks. It was the Elvis He Touched Me record, 'cause
Yeah?
I grew up Elvis was my first concert, and second was, second and third were Alice Cooper's Billion Dollar Babies and the School's Out
Oh,
album, and Alice was from Phoenix, or he grew up in Phoenix, and I kid you not, we'd go to church, and I'd sit there. It's a real small church. I'd watch the preacher move around as he preached. It was a Pentecostal church, and I would have one of those 8 tracks, especially I mean, it wasn't Elvis, it was one of the Alice Cooper 8 tracks, And I'd just be following my eyes would follow the preacher, and that 8 track is playing in my head. And even getting right in the middle of the song and where that click back over and there'd be that overlap and all that. I mean, I had it down just like that the whole time. And, the pastor thought I was just glued and hanging on every word that he was saying. And I was tripping out the I love the dead or $1 billion babies or something. So that's just, yeah, that I for that reason, I hope 8 tracks don't come back because I've written many songs that way. But on this album, which song would you point to as your calling card for the rest of the record? Saying if you like this song, you're really going to love the rest of the record.
Well, more obviously, the first song on it was a song that was on my Universal South record,
Mm,
and it was released as a single right as the crash came in '07, and Universal South closed their doors and we lost our momentum. I think our new version of that came out really good, but I also I think the song uh, Heavy Load, which is an interesting song on there. See, the whole concept behind this record is that all the songs are somehow about love, but
mhm.
not I love you, you love me. There's a couple love songs, but then after you do that, what do you write about? And that's just from a writer's point of view, that's a great challenge to say, I'm going to write 14 songs here that are all about love, and there's only going to be one real love song. So Heavy Load was written I wrote it 2 or 3 days after this young boy named Dylan Ruth went into, he went to Charleston into this church, and they invited him in this church. The people that were having the meeting in the church invited him in and they fed him. They gave him food, and they were kind to him, and they set him in the circle so they could have a prayer meeting with him, and he shot them. He took their lives. And, I know this is not a religious broadcast, and I'm not a outwardly, I'm a sinner. I'm not anybody you should look up to. But I try to be a Christian, and we're supposed to forgive, and we're supposed to love, and I sit down here and I go, "How do you forgive that man? How do you love that person?" Because of what that did and how that affected those people, and so the lyric is, "The shot rang out, and a mama cried. No, a shot rang out and innocents died. Everybody shook their head and wondered why did he have nobody? What went wrong? How does a heart get that dark and gone? Then there's the pre-chorus that goes for both, and it goes, sometimes when it's hard to bear the weight, sometimes when you feel you're about to break, let love carry. And then it says, let love carry every heavy load. And so it's because, and that's also a really weird thing because I'm a U.S. Army veteran. I've been deployed for our country. I'm 100% behind the Second Amendment. I own weapons. I think legal, law-abiding American citizens should be allowed to have weapons. So we got to do something. But what in the world do we do? So that song is really just a calling card for us to have a discussion about how do we fix this stuff so
Yes.
that our children don't have to keep going through this.
We have to fix hearts. That's the thing.
Yes, my friend.
And build it in, build the quality in, not try to add it on. And that comes with upbringing, good education, good, ethics and morals and that kind of thing. And if the heart is right, everything else mostly falls into place. I think.
Well said, Randy Patterson.
Well, thank you. It's just, I'm watching what's going on in this world, and I thought, did I fall through a rabbit hole? It just really. I mean, who thought we would see some of the stuff we're seeing these days? I'll
Right,
leave it at that. It's not a political statement. It's a heart statement, you know.
right.
And so, one thing about your video, I wanted to ask you about, just kind of off the wall question. Did I see right? Were you playing in that the music video you were making, were you playing in your socks or were those some really thin shoes you had on?
Well, those were my socks, and I normally play barefoot.
Ah,
Uh,
okay.
and I've been playing barefoot for, gosh, a couple decades now. And I don't, it's just kind of something that I do. I really kind of, I can feel the drums and things a little better. It
Well,
just
that
kind
makes
of
sense.
feels a
Yeah.
little more organic to me. But that video was shot at the end of the day of a long video shoot, and I forgot to take my socks off, and nobody had mentioned it to me until we had already shot it. And my manager said, "You forgot to take your socks off," and I said, "Well, I think it was your job to tell me to take my socks off." So those are socks.
Yep. All right. That's what I thought. I thought, boy, it's either socks or some really thin shoes I haven't seen yet. So, what's on your radar for the coming year and going into next year? What you got going on?
Well, we're doing a lot of playing this summer, a lot of touring. We've got some pretty nice shows coming up for those folks that are in the Florida area. Down on Memorial Day, we're going to be playing at the theater there at the Villages
Oh,
outside of Orlando, Florida. That's a nice gig back there. And then we're doing our, I think it's our 6th or 7th year this year with the Charlotte Symphony down in Huntersville. We play a gig with them every year, and it's just one of the highlights of the year. The down in Cornelius, North Carolina, so the whole town comes, and we have the orchestra, and it's a beautiful event. We're hoping to move into doing a lot of theaters. We have been doing a lot of fairs and festivals and kind of, long where's a whole bunch of bands on a bill, that kind of
right.
stuff. But we like playing theaters and smaller places where we can really, 800 seats or so, we can look at people and see them. And we're trying to move into that. And I hope that's what we do. I'm working on a new record, and it's probably gonna be a little more, back and forth of that fiddle stuff, that guitar thing. We're working on some long passages where we play them together in harmony and stuff, and our piano player comes in. I feel very fortunate, Randy, that I get to play, and I've done this since I moved to Nashville. My only goal when I moved to Nashville wasn't what kind of band it was, what kind of music they played, doesn't matter how they traveled, it didn't ma the only thing that mattered to me was I wanted everyone in that band to be better than I was.
Mm,
I want them to be better musicians than I was so that I could learn from them.
stretch.
And
Yeah.
and I'm hoping this year to put as much time as I can in every day on my guitar. And when I show up to play and people come see us, that even if I have a bad night, they don't notice.
Nice way to bring that around full circle.
Yes, sir.
That's really cool. Well, man, if you're going to be my neck of the woods, give me
Hey,
a shout, man. Drop me a
I'd
note.
love for you to come, man.
Man,
I'd
I would
love
love
that.
that, man. Come up and shake hands, hug necks, whatever, and watch you play. That would be a thrill for me. And I try to get around. Right now, I'm tied down a little bit. I getting to take care of my dad, and I like you and I started in the beginning. I wouldn't trade that for anything in the world. But if you're gigging somewhere at night nearby, let me know, and I'll make arrangements and come over and see you, and maybe we can chat before or after the game, the show, the gig. And I'd just love to sit and hang with you a little bit and talk
We
some more.
will do that. Let's do that anyway, Randy. I go to Nashville all the time. We could stop and have dinner. Or heck, if that Bucky's keeps growing near your house, they'll probably have bands and concerts for long, right?
Yeah. Well, I just
Could
saw.
that
Yeah,
place
I mean
be any
that.
more audacious?
Yeah, that Bucky's is 30 minutes from my doorstep here. So it's. I tell you where I live, Rocky. I can go out on my front deck and I can hear the whistle blow from the train at Dollywood.
I know
That's
exactly where you live,
Yeah,
man.
I'm a
Yeah.
mile and a half up the road from the service entrance into Dollywood. So, and
Well, let's get together, brother. Let's do
let's do
that.
it. Let's do it. I'll get my email information from John, and I'll route phone numbers and all that through him to you, and let's
Yes,
stay in
please.
touch, man. This is there's people near you. One of the how far are you from Boone, North Carolina?
Uh, Not far. My daughter's at App State right now in Boone. It's about 2 hours from here.
Oh, okay. Well, the attorney, God, it just slipped my mind. I wasn't even planning on saying it to you. The attorney that fought the legal case against some crooks. He represented John and Yoko for a lawsuit. I interviewed him a couple years ago. He lives in Boone. Um,
Okay.
the Williams, Rich Williams of Kansas. He lives right outside of Boone. There's several people that, you know, fun people you should probably get to know just for the sake of talking shop, you know? They all
Heck
live
yeah,
over
man.
there.
I'd love that.
Yeah, but you know what? Some weekend soon, I'm gonna make arrangements. I'm just gonna shoot you a note and let you know I'm coming over. We'll do lunch or something.
Come down. Come down. I'll cook for you, man. I'll show you the studio.
Oh, that'd
We'll
be
hang
fun.
out.
That would be
I
a
would
lot of
love
fun.
that very
Right.
much.
I'll
Let's
route
totally
the
do it. Ready?
information to you and likewise, and love the album, love the documentary, and I'll let you guys know when this thing posts. It'll be 2 or 3 weeks out because my editor's backed up, but,
Sure.
I think you'll be happy with how we treat it, and, please know, Rocky, my door is always open to you. So anything you've got coming up, you know, music wise, or if you're doing a concert DVD or whatever, get a hold of me. We'll set up one of these and we'll let the world know.
Thank you, man. I appreciate it, Randy. It means so much to me. Thank you,
Uh,
sir.
Thank you. Take care and be
Yes, sir.
safe. Okay.
Yes, sir. We'll see
All
you
right.
soon.